This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. This is the Fast Break Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Anderson, and alongside me, as always, is Ricky Widmer.
What's up, guys?
And Dave Oster.
Hey, everybody.
And today, we are going to be talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves firing Tom Thibodeau. We're going to be talking about teams that need to make a move at the trade deadline, and then we're going to wrap it up with something new. It is the NBA Draft Mailbag. We are going to be responding to the comments you left in our YouTube video about our mock draft. So we looked at the 1.0, we looked at 2.0 comments, 1 through 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 30, and picked the best comments, and we'll all discuss your guys' thoughts about our mock draft from last week. Before we do that, just want to throw out there, patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. And you may be wondering why I'm throwing it out there early in the topic. It's because for the Minnesota Timberwolves, we are going to be welcoming in our patron of, 15 months? Is it 15 months, Jake?
Something like that.
It's something stupid.
He's
It was
over a
from
year.
October
15 or 16.
2017.
October. So November, December, January. 15. Boom. Off the top of my head. For 15 straight months, we are welcoming Jake.
Really off the top of your head, you have to count it out on your fingers.
Well, I said 15 first. No, I said 15 first. So I knew it. I was double.
Credit.
I was double guessing. But anyways, we're welcoming in Jake to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves fired Tom Thibodeau after a win against the Lakers. Now they have their eyes on apparently Fred Hoiberg for either the GM or head coaching spot. They need to fill that role. A lot of people have covered at least the idea of why that he got fired, why now, and what their future can look like. But we're going to focus more on the future and this season. So Jake, first off, I know you had a major reaction to the firing of Tom Thibodeau. Did it make sense in your mind of why it happened at the time it did? Before we get into the future,
I think it kind of makes sense. I think it was pretty weird to fire him after he just won a game by 20. But I think the team hasn't really made much progress over him the last couple of years, and they brought in Jimmy Butler, obviously with the big expectations that they were finally going to push to be a contender, and Wiggins really hasn't come out to be the player that they thought he was going to be. I think he was trying to hang on to Jimmy Butler for as long as he could, because I think he knew as soon as he let him go, things were going to spiral out of control, and he probably was going to be gone sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think the thing with that, though, is like why then, when it came out before the offseason that Jimmy demanded to be traded, and then obviously went on their whole Rachel Nichols media tour, and he even played a little bit for the Timberwolves before getting traded on November 12th. Why it didn't happen sooner or immediately after he traded Jimmy Butler, I don't know why you let Tom Thibodeau make that move before, and then even let him coach after making that move. I think maybe it kind of makes sense more with the Fred Hoiberg stuff coming out and UCLA having interested in him bringing him on as the new head coach. But Dave, when you heard the news, when you thought this, did you have the same line of thinking as Jake and I?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a surprise that it happened. It was a surprise on the timing that it happened. I think that it's just one of those situations where there was some final straw that broke, I'm sure, like up top. There was like some like nothing argument. It was just like, and yeah, it's that realization like, all right, you've done good recently. I don't even care. Like, the damage is done. We're moving on as a franchise. It doesn't matter that you won, that game by 20, because none of that matters at this point to us. We just need to move on. Our players need to move on, and yeah. So,
I mean, it kind of brings into my mind, because I know I've been here before. For me, I can't speak for everyone, but
yeah,
it's like when you're in that relationship and you're thinking to yourself, you know what? Is this going to last? Like, should I just end it now? And you like try to talk yourself out of it. And then like a month or two later, you're like, yeah, I should have ended it there. I'm ending it now. Yeah. And that's what I think this season has been for the Timberwolves. They had their sign of doubt. No, we can make this work. They trade Jimmy. No, we can make this work till the end of the year. And this was just, hey, this to me is the Timberwolves doing what the Bulls should have done. Hey, we're going to fire our guy now so that not only do coaches know we're open, it gets us on the board so we can entice candidates now. And you could say it could be because, hey, they want a guy like Fred Hoiberg, and UCLA was like, hey, we really want him. And they go, no, we're going to fire Tom so that Fred knows our job's open.
You brought that idea up of enticing and letting them know it's open. I still don't really understand, because you're not going to bring in Fred Hoiberg in now.
No, but it gets the juices flowing of like, hey, you know this job is open rather than, because it's like for me, when I came out of college looking for jobs, it was, oh, this teaching job might be open, but okay, this one is definitely open, so I can get my game plan of what to do in an interview to woo them now, rather than, well, it might be open, so I'm not really committing to it because I don't know for sure if it's going to be open or not.
Well, then, Jake, playing off that, at least if that was their idea to entice, potential candidates like a Fred Hoiberg, how enticing is this Minnesota job in your mind with Andrew Wiggins, Karl-Anthony Towns, a rejuvenated Derrick Rose, having some players like Josh Okogie on the roster as well? How intriguing is the Minnesota job in your mind to potential head coaching candidates?
Well, I think first off, probably why it happened sooner, because I think they wanted to try out Saunders as their head coach and see if he was a right fit or not. And I mean, I think the only really enticing thing about this entire job is Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't think Andrew Wiggins and his contract's very enticing, and Derrick Rose obviously being rejuvenated this year is great, but one, we don't know how long he's going to keep it up. Two, obviously he could get hurt at any time. And three, we don't even know if he's going to be back next year with the team. So looking at this team, I think they literally have a core of one. I think they have a lot of good role players around them, but unless Wiggins makes some super crazy jumps that we haven't been ready for, haven't seen any really glimpses of, I don't think especially in that max deal, honestly, I don't think they'll be able to move him. So you're probably stuck with him. And Towns obviously is top 5 center in the league. He's crazy talented. So I think he's the guy the entire team should be built around.
I think the Saunders thing is definitely interesting. Wanted to try him out. He is 32 years old, obviously the son of Flip Saunders, who passed away. But he even survived the Tom Thibodeau hiring as well. He was not moved on from as an assistant coach when Thibodeau was brought on, something that I found a little bit unusual. And now, obviously, he's going to be the interim. I don't know if they then move on from him again. I don't know exactly what his position would be because he's been with the team for 5 years now. Maybe this is to even show him off to potential teams because they know if a coach is going to come in, they might not want to keep Ryan around and obviously want to do a solid to Flip, someone who's beloved in Minnesota for the time that he did obviously from 2014 to his passing, then obviously before then as well, early in the 2000s. So maybe it's just a good knock for Ryan, but I think it'd be interesting to see what they do under him. Obviously, he's come out and said that they want him to be avoiding long twos. They are 1-1 in their last in their 2 games underneath Ryan. So I think that is interesting. But I think you hit the nail on the head, at least with I don't think they're going to be able to move Wiggins because of that contract, and it is extremely interesting because of Karl-Anthony Towns. But Dave, bringing that up, you also see why Jimmy Butler left, why a veteran all-star left. Because those guys weren't trying. Is that going to be in your mind? And does that kind of take away a little bit of the shine of this Minnesota coaching job that you have 2 young players that might not be ready to compete every single game?
I think it shouldn't scare away coaches. I think it should kind of challenge them. And that's the thing is you have to have the right head coach mentality to meet the players because a lot of guys is, how do you react to adversity? Some people need to be, soft hand, like help them through it, really be their buddy throughout. And other guys need a harsh, you need to get your head out of your ass and start acting like it right now. And I think the problem was that Tom has a certain harshness to him. And that didn't vibe for everybody. Obviously, Jimmy was looking for that. Jimmy's like, that's what I grew up on. That's what I expect. I earned my way into the league. I earned my playing time. I'm going to earn my next contract. Whereas Wiggins and Cat got theirs off of potential and not so much, proven results consistently. So I think the interesting thing for me and exactly what Jake brought up was, showcasing Saunders here as a potential coach. I feel like he was untouchable when Tom came in. It was just the org was no, he's staying, he's family, we're all family.
You got to understand of the timeline of everything where Flip passed away October of 2015.
Yeah.
Thibodeau got the job in 2016. So it was literally a couple months, even a half a year later, Thibodeau got the job. I wouldn't be surprised if ownership was no, you can't get rid of him. He stays.
Yeah, I think that was just a clear line in the sand for them, and I don't blame them for it. And as an org, they've obviously got a great relationship. But like I said, as far as challenging these young players, I think he might be the better guy to do it because he is more of a player's coach. He can relate more. He's a younger guy who has been with the team for basically the entirety of these kids' careers. So I look to him to really try to pull out some energy from them. And we saw Wiggins had his best game of the year just recently against OKC, and that in his first game coaching. Like, it was awesome. Wiggins went up for 40, 10, and 4, steal, block, and shooting pretty efficiently. Went to the line 18 times. Like, there is talent in him. You just have to coax it out, and I think that Flip could be the right guy for it. So I'm all for letting him run the rest of the season out as the head coach. I would love to see what he can do with them. And if he gets positive results out of Cat and Wiggins, awesome. Like, I'm ready to move forward with him because that's more than we can say for anything Tom Thibodeau was able to do.
Yeah, I mean, those players, at least Wiggins and Towns, have been on a little bit of a hot streak. I think in the past 8 games, Karl-Anthony Towns, 28.5 points per game, shooting 53% from the field, 34% from 3, 14 boards, 4.1 assists, about a steal a game, 3 blocks per game. And then the past 5 games, Wiggins, 26.4 points per game, 44% from the field, 32% from 3, 5 boards, 3 assists, about a block a game, and a half a steal a game. So, I mean, they have been able to produce lately. I don't know if that's because of anything that's happened exactly, if they're finding a groove, or if it's just a hot streak. I think with Wiggins, it might just be more of a hot streak. And Karl-Anthony Towns, again, he's getting a higher usage since Jimmy left. Before Jimmy when Jimmy was on the team, he was averaging around 19 points a game. Now he's all the way up to 23. So I think he's found himself more that Jimmy's gone. Jake, I'm going to go back to you now, just because you brought up Ryan Saunders, and obviously he is young. And Dave mentioned his youth, and obviously that he's more of a player's coach. Do you think that he is a legitimate candidate for this Timberwolves job? Because now that Thibodeau's fired, they have the president of basketball operations open. Most likely that's going to go to Scott Layden, who is the current GM. So that means they're going to have the GM spot open and then the head coaching spot open. So how do you think this is going to play out, and do you think that Ryan Saunders is a candidate for the next Timberwolves head coaching spot?
Well, we've kind of seen this whole trend change a lot in the NFL as people are trying to go with the younger coaches with, I guess, new mindsets. I mean, could possibly see that in the NBA. He could be the first one. I mean, if he would go into Minnesota, get the full-time coaching job, and get them back into the playoffs, then maybe that would start the trend in the NBA, just like the NFL. But I don't think, first off, they have to 100% avoid giving GM and coach to the same person again, because there are very few people in the entire league who can do that, and Tom Thibodeau is definitely not one of them. If you look at their contract situations, I mean, you're paying Gorgie Dang $16 and $17 million over the next 2 years, and you're paying Wiggins that max contract, obviously. But then, obviously, with the coaching job, they brought up Fred Hoiberg, who was the Timberwolves. They're living to that motto, full and true. And, I mean, I honestly think that he wouldn't be too bad of a candidate. I don't think it's a 2-horse race, but I think right now, obviously, you put Saunders and Hoiberg with that motion offense could actually maybe fit this team, because when he went to Chicago, I know Ricky's kind of said this over and over again, he was kind of set up for failure. He never really got his entire roster that he wanted, and maybe here in Minnesota it'd be more of a roster that could fit his entire offense that he wanted to build in Chicago.
And there's one thing too, at least with that, one guy who's really plugged in with the Timberwolves is John Krasinski of The Athletic. He says Saunders already has the respect of the locker room. He does have a ton of experience for his age. He's younger than 42 NBA players, like active NBA players. And going with that too, the talk of Hoiberg also hasn't been of him as the coach. It also has been of him as the GM. So maybe they do, because I think Hoiberg's been a part of the Minnesota Timberwolves front office before, and obviously as a player before as well. So maybe they do look to keep Ryan on as well. They have head coaching experience in at the GM spot in Fred Hoiberg. He can help him come along as a head coach, but then also Fred Hoiberg can find the guys that fit the system. That could definitely be a possibility. Also possible for the coaching job is Monty Williams has been thrown out there. Fred Hoiberg has been thrown out there, along with Chauncey Billups for that GM spot. But Ricky, what was the point that you want to jump in with?
Well, and the thing that I mean, first off, is I 110% agree with Jake. The thing I want to see abolished in coaching, especially for the NBA, is this head coach GM or head coach player of basketball operations joint kind of thing, because as we've seen already, it doesn't work. Didn't work with Tom Thibodeau. I'm going to say it didn't work with Doc Rivers. There's only one coach in, I'm going to say, all of sports that I can definitively say, all right, it worked. And that is Bill Belichick.
Greg Popovich.
That is it. Well, Greg Popovich too. So, okay, two. But like when I think of the guy in all of sports that can do both, Bill Belichick is just the first one that comes to my mind, where He's the GM. He also is the head coach. And he also is technically the defensive coordinator. So, I mean, in basketball, it's really hard to do. And I just want to see it kind of abolished. For me, there were kind of 3 coaches that I was kind of thinking of in my head.
Yeah.
The first one is Saunders. You keep him on. He's got the respective locker room. I'm going to call him a Timberwolves guy and someone these young players can rally behind. Number 2 would be a Fred Hoiberg. If you're going to do what you just said and have him be the GM to Flip's coach, that would work. But if Ryan's coach, but if you want to bring him in to be the head coach, I think Hoiberg would have 10 times more success here than in Chicago, because in Chicago, it was completely different. It was, hey, we're going to get you young talent and we're going to do this. Oh, by the way, here's D. Wade. Really, last time I checked, D. Wade was not young. And, oh, by the way, here's all this old talent. Oh, wait, really, Rajon Rondo? We're making a playoff run now. With the Timberwolves, because Wiggins is locked in, because Cat is locked in, they're younger. The Timberwolves aren't going to be that team that's going to go, here's a bunch of old guys, make it work. They're going to be like, okay, let's work with you to continual drafting. That's one thing I think they should do this year, is not completely tank, because they might be too far out to get a top 5. But right now they're only 2.5 games out of the top 6. And eventually, if I'm the T-Wolves, I would make a decision of what's more important, making the playoffs or getting a top 6 pick. Because we've even talked about in our mock draft how after a point, there's a fall off in talent. And I just think he'd have more success in Chicago. The other guy off
that point real quick about the playoffs, because I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I guess we'll get into the future a little bit. They are, although they're very close to being near the bottom of the Western Conference, they're also only 2.5 games out of a playoff spot. So playoffs
they're right
are
in the
well
middle.
Within reach.
And I mean, I'm not saying make that decision right now, but eventually you're going to need to flip that switch in my mind of like, okay, what's more important? Making the playoffs, having a lower pick, or because we're so close to the 6th overall pick anyways, all right, you get some rest, we're going to strategize here and maybe lose some games without blatantly going out and saying we're going to lose them. The only other coach that I bring up, and this third one could be anybody, but there's one that came to mind that might piss off some people. I'm going to say bring in a college coach, somebody from the college game. And my first thought went to like, a Calipari, a Coach K. Neither of those 2 guys are going to leave Kentucky and Duke in my mind. So why not bring in a guy then, and this is third option, so this is after you've expunged other options, like a Rick Pitino. And I know everything that's going on with what happened with him at Louisville, but I think he could be a guy, or if you have found your Brad Stevens, I think that Jake is right. We've seen in the NFL with the last coaching hires, if you had lunch with Sean McVay, if you had a phone call with Sean McVay, hell, if you even knew Sean McVay's sister-in-law, then we're going to give you an interview because you had some point of contact with Sean McVay. That's the trend. Well, maybe in the NBA with a team like the Timberwolves, like a team like we saw in Boston, maybe a guy like Brad Stevens. Can you find the next Brad Stevens, the next guy that can mold young minds? Because that's what your team is. They're young, and they need to be molded.
He went to one of the most prestigious franchises in NBA history.
Yeah.
Has a great GM in Danny Ainge. And also with Brad Stevens, very controversial hire when it was first made. And then also, was he one of a kind? Because how many other coaches have been able to make that transition from college to NBA game as successfully as he has? The only guy that I can think of is Larry Brown in my mind, since he's the only coach to ever win an NBA title and an NCAA championship.
And here's the risk. You don't know until you find out. You don't know until you give that next. And I don't even know off the top of my head because like Brad Stevens was such a bottle in the storm. He had built up a program at Butler, a program that was prestigious, but not as prestigious, was in the national spotlight because of what he's done with it. And of course, Gordon Hayward helped also being there during his tenure. But that's something else. If you can find a candidate who you think from college that can do the same thing that Brad's doing in Boston, I say you go with it. You have to go with that guy, not a guy that's just going to be another old gun like Tom Thibodeau was.
And then I'll go back to Jake real quick. Jake, I mean, building off of what Ricky said, those three options, is there anything that you agree with, or is there something that you had in mind, at least, for who should step in as the next coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves?
No, I mean, there aren't many candidates that jump out at me right now. I think, honestly, right now, we got to give Saunders a couple of months and see how he fares out the rest of the season. Because, I mean, if he gets his team into the playoffs, and, I mean, they're sitting 2 games under 500 now, if he can get them over 500 into the playoffs, I think the job should almost be his, considering how long he's been in the organization. And then you need to go out and find an experienced GM to help him basically get molded into his into whatever role he's going to play. But I also want to say the best you said about sharing lunch with Sean McVay. The best one was, I think I sent this to Sean. If somebody had a Bud Light Lime with Sean McVay at the NFL Combine, and they got an NFL job. It
was Kevin Clark who tweeted that from the Ringer, dropping that Bud Light Lime reference. But Dave, going off this, and let's go to this season at least right now. And Jake brought this up with Ryan Saunders. If you can get him in the playoffs, get him over 500, then he would definitely put himself in line to being a for sure candidate to take the Timberwolves in the next season. How much of that is a possibility? Because I look right now, 8 and below, I would say they're the second most likely team to jump from bottom 8 to top 8 right now. I put the Jazz above them because obviously they're closer. I think they're only a game out of the Lakers right now. They're
correct
7.5 back of the Nuggets. Lakers are 6.5 games back. I would put the Jazz there because not only are they more talented than the Timberwolves, obviously they're closer to that spot. But I would also say that, looking at Dallas, they're coming down and they're relying heavily on a 19-year-old. JJ Barea just came down and he was a huge part of that team.
And they can only win at home.
They can only win at home. And then you look at New Orleans. I still think that they need to make a trade, and also how much can Anthony Davis really carry them? They're also a team that can only win at home. They're 15-6 at home and 5-16 away. Looking at Minnesota, they can't win away either. No team really can in the NBA this year. But I still look at Minnesota as which team has the most talent. Don't want to write off the Kings as well, but they're a team that I don't really believe in. They're playing very quickly. How much can that literally sustain? Can they do that for 82 games? I would say that they're the second most likely team from going the bottom 8 to top 8. Is it possible that he does that this year, though?
I absolutely do believe it's possible that Saunders can take them from bottom 8 to top 8. This team has talent. Like, talent's never been the problem. It's actually putting it together on the court. And now that they have, Robert Covington and Dario to help with that depth at the wing position, I'm not super concerned about basically anything but Derrick Rose's health moving forward. Like, this team will rise and fall with him because he's still, for all the shit people want to give him, like, he's still a special player. And if he's running, the 1 or 2 for you, you have a chance. Mm-hmm. Any night you have a chance. And that's one of the fun things that I'm probably a homer about him anyway, but whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, I like the way the team plays currently. I think the thing is you just have to keep making sure the right guys get the ball in their hands. Like you said, Cat's usage after Butler's gone has appropriately risen. Wiggins has more spacing to work with because Robert Covington's able to stretch the floor out. Dario, same thing, stretches the floor, more room for Wiggins. Like, everything, that trade has had actually a really great impact on the guys they need to spotlight. So they've set themselves up nicely, but having to rely on a injury-prone Derrick Rose and then a Teague who I don't know if anyone's really in love with, it's just it'd be rough for them to do it, but I can see them, like you said, they would be my second. Obviously, I'm closer on the Kings though, but I think the Jazz have to be the thought because shit, they're down 2 point guards and they're still winning games. Like, It's just they're a very good defensive team, and they've got a couple special players between Gobert and Mitchell. So I look at the Timberwolves as dark horse to make the playoffs, but they have every piece of talent on that team to get there.
The only thing that I look at them, though, is what is going to be able to change from Ryan Saunders to Tom Thibodeau, and maybe the biggest thing is just morale of this team, because you look at what's happened in the past 2 games compared to what happened since the Jimmy Butler trade. It's not like they're taking more threes. They're taking 27 threes a game from Jimmy Butler to Tom Thibodeau's firing. In the past 2 games, they've taken 27.5. Nothing's really changed there. The only thing I can think of is, because usually we see, with the Nick Nurse thing, Nick Nurse comes in from Dwayne Casey. We see an uptick in threes. This team changes. With Budenholzer, we see a change with how they're moving the ball around, how they're spacing the floor, how they're attacking, how they're consistent
defense.
Yeah, how they're consistently, just keeping that ball alive offensively. I think the only thing that I can see changing, at least with this, is maybe just more effort being put in on the Wiggins and Cat side, and even the Jeff Teague side, and maybe even seeing more Josh Okogie. I think that would be the biggest thing personnel wise, because he's been phenomenal. Obviously Thibodeau, we know the whole stick of him not wanting to play young guys. So I think the biggest thing for them is just maybe if they put more effort into it, we'll see more successful yield for them. But I still look talent wise. I would say that they're probably, again, maybe the 9th most talented team in the Western Conference right now, because you look at Los Angeles when LeBron's healthy, they're extremely talented. You look at San Antonio, they have 2 All-Stars in DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. You look at Portland, they have 2 great guards in CJ, Dame, and obviously Nurkic. This year has been phenomenal.
He was a near wet boy for me.
He was. Denver has been all around fantastic. They have the best center in the league in Nikola Jokic.
Lies.
Golden State is absolutely Golden State. The Rockets have James Harden, who's been extremely phenomenal. The only team that I would probably put them over right now is possibly Los Angeles, but Los Angeles has been so well-rounded, the Clippers, so well-rounded that it's tough to really beat them any given night because they don't need to rely on one player every single night, although Tobias Harris has been able to put up some great numbers so far for the Clippers. So I look at them as talented, but are they talented enough as a team?
And that's why I can't, before you jump back in, I can't help but think in my head, when it comes to Ryan Saunders, at the end of the year, when we're done with what the T-Wolves have done, are we going to look back on it, and will their management look back on it on a, oh, yes, he's the right guy for the job? Or will we look back on it and go, yeah, it's like when the teacher quits halfway through, and it's like, oh, here's your substitute for the half year, and it's like, the guys played better, and it was happier, but this is not the guy they go with long term. Like, that's which side are we going to see after the year? Yeah. Yes, this is our guy, or no, this was just our interim temp guy to carry us over.
He's an interim coach right now.
No, I know, but like, what? And we're not going to get this answer to the end.
I'll give them credit. They're not idiots. They're not giving him the guaranteed contract like we did to Boylan.
Exactly.
But no, I think it's it's interesting that you're saying that you don't think that they've got all the talent there to win, at least to get to the playoffs. And I'm on the other side. I think they absolutely have the talent, and I think the morale change is enough to do it for them. I think the pieces are there for them. They're not going to win a championship by any means, but they've got enough talent to make it to the playoffs, especially with LeBron being out for long term at this point, because I've heard reports that he won't be back till February now. So if that's the case, and like the other team I look at is the other team in LA and the Clippers, you say they can get it any night from anybody. I say that they don't have a consistent starting 5 because they have to rely. They're so deep that they don't give overall minutes to their best talent. Like, I look at a player like Harrell who should be getting 30 minutes a night. Same with Lou Will. It's like, yeah, I know he plays great off the bench because he can abuse second unit players, and the same with Harrell. But like, you need to get them both out there for more. But because they use Gallo and Toby together, like, this floor spacing has to be as so.
Yeah, I just question talent-wise because, yes, they obviously have Dario, they have Rocco, they have Cat, they have Wiggins, they have Derrick Rose. I don't know how harmonious that is. And then also you look to that bench. Outside of Okogie, I don't know who's dangerous on that team because Jeff Teague, chucker.
Teague, Teague can be a good scorer.
I don't think the talent's there, again, harmoniously. Okay. And that's what I was talking about with the Jazz. Like, when Donovan Mitchell's passing the ball and working that ball around the offense, we see them be a very dangerous team. We saw that last year, and I don't think that's really changed. It's just, I think kind of a mindset in Donovan Mitchell. I think I saw a stat when he has over 7 assists a game, like they're, I think they have like 2 losses or something over his career. So when that ball's flowing around for Utah, they're really they become an extremely dangerous team. You look at Houston; it's tough to beat James Harden when he's putting up 34 a night every single night, and the talent around them when CP3's healthy, Clint Capella's there. You have now Austin Rivers coming up from the ashes, playing phenomenally. That's something that's dangerous. Again, Los Angeles when they're running up and down the Lakers. Up and down the court with LeBron James, the best player in the NBA. Like, talent-wise, I don't know if it's harmonious enough for Minnesota yet. I haven't seen that yet. And again, maybe Ryan Saunders can unlock that, give more minutes to Dario and see what he can do off the bench. But I just don't think it's there right now. But going off that, final thing is talent-wise and player personnel. What do they need to add, Jake? And we'll do this to you, and then we'll also finally get at least some predictions if anyone throw it out there for coaches. But player personnel, what's one thing that the Minnesota Timberwolves need to address in this offseason to make them a more dangerous team in the Western Conference in the upcoming years?
Well, I think their roster is built pretty well. I think they have a pretty good bench. They have that absolute number one in town. They need a dominant wing. They need what Wiggins was supposed to be, or is supposed to be, I guess. They need to get that guy who I understand Rose has been good, but Rose isn't always consistent enough, and he obviously can go down in a second. But they need that guy who can dominate defense. They had him. They had Jimmy Butler. They had the exact guy that they need to get. They need to find that winger that is dominant enough that you can give him the last shot. He can defend the best player on the team. And, I mean, that's what Wiggins was supposed to be, and that's exactly what they need to be able to be a top team in the West. And I also want to add your top team in the West with the best center in the league is down 13 to the Suns at half. Just want to throw that one in there.
Game's not over.
Yikes.
Game's not over. Gary Harris is injured, so find a new slang.
Find a new slang. But yeah, they need to find the exact winger that they had. They need to find the guy that can dominate the wing play whenever Towns isn't going off or whenever they need a basket. They don't have to pass it down to the post of Towns. They need Jimmy Butler. It's literally what they need. And
you'd hope that'd be Wiggins at some point.
Yeah,
but again, it's been so long in his career. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Dave, personnel-wise, what do you think this team needs?
I'll put irrational faith in Andrew Wiggins. Why not? Like, I'll be that guy and be like, why not? Why can't he put up, he's already putting up 22 a night at this point. Like, why can't he continue to get better? I mean, the whole knock on him was effort. He now has a coach who he seemingly gets along with better, who doesn't hate him and want to ruin his knees by the age of 25. So, like, everything's coming up sunshine for him. I think that, in all honesty, they do need to, this offseason, I would probably look to them to add both guard and wing depth because, honestly, they need just depth, period.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're very short on the bench, and whether Derrick Rose is healthy or not, if they're going to sign him to a 2-year deal or something, throw it out there, he might be intrigued to stay with his core. He might not. He might want to go take a shot at a better team. No offense, Timberwolves, at a better team and try to go win a ring because it's Derrick Rose.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing with Wiggins is just his efficiency, and he's never been efficient throughout his career. His best year, true shooting-wise, has been 45.3%, and then this year it's sitting at the worst it's ever been at 50%, and that's not, I mean, even at that peak of 54%. That's not dangerous. That's not elite. Right now, the 19-year-old Luka Doncic is shooting 56% true shooting wise.
Hey, don't compare Luka.
I'm just saying, like, you can be more efficient, and Andrew Wiggins has never shown efficiency for himself. And yes, he can put up those numbers. But Russell Westbrook's out here putting 24 points up, but also he's the worst 3-point shooter in modern NBA history.
Yeah.
So like
But now Wiggins has floor spacers out there with him. I mean, that's the thing. You emptied the paint out for him in my mind.
Again, he might be 2 years away from being 2 years away.
You got a Bruno him?
At least from being efficient. Like he's never been efficient. I
don't know if he'll ever be efficient.
And I think that's the biggest thing for him.
He can be a good scorer. And at some point,
but I think being a guy who puts up 22 a night, I don't know if that's being a good scorer if you can't be efficient. I would rather have him put up 18 a night and be a very efficient player than have him putting up a chucking 22. Yeah. I mean, Tim Hardaway can give you 22 a night, but you just got to give him enough shots that he makes. I mean, that's the biggest thing with him. Also, I think Wiggins kind of shies away from contact too much. And we saw, obviously, that 40-point performance. Goes to the line 18 times.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that more
it's
from him.
Absolutely
I'd love
in
to
him.
see
That's
him
what
be
I'm
more
saying.
aggressive.
Like, I think it's 100% mental. I'm hoping they can whip him in shape. Regardless, they do need to address depth at guard and wing. And hell, even like...
It's in him, it's in Brandon Ingram, but we haven't seen it yet. So that's the thing, is that we just have not seen consistency from any of these guys. So until I see it, I'm not going to be... What's that?
Brandon Ingram's a bum.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
I wouldn't disagree with it. I mean, when he's playing nice, I mean, he just had a game where he had like 7 assists, and he looked, like last year Brandon Ingram, where he was, the facilitating point forward, and he looked fantastic. But again, it's not consistent. Andrew Wiggins can have a game of 40. He's done it before in his career, but it's not consistent ever. I need consistency and I need efficiency from Andrew Wiggins. Ricky, personnel-wise, or do you want to jump on that coach thing?
Me, it's Cat. That's the guy who I focus on. The reason why is I go back to, all I can think about is going back way long ago when I read John Calipari's book, and there was almost like an entire chapter dedicated to Karl-Anthony Towns and like just how he coached him, because he's so unique of a player where he kind of needs that, hey, this is what you're doing. It's not that I don't believe in you. I just have the better roadmap for you. But he's also a guy that takes criticism to the next level, where he's got that little imaginary friend that sits on his shoulder that he calls Carlito, and he talks to Carlito like an actual person.
I don't know if that's still a thing.
Oh, I'm saying Calipari mentioned it in the book, and that's where I had saw that. But the last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to throw something at Jake, because you're from the Philly area. I mentioned Brad Stevens before and finding that possible guy. What would your thoughts be if the Timberwolves targeted a guy like Jay Wright from Villanova? Not that will he leave, because right now it's still kind of in the air if he would leave, but Villanova hasn't looked as impressive as they've looked in years past. And with you being a guy that's from Pennsylvania, what would you think if it's like Timberwolves next head coach, Jay Wright? What would be your mindset and your thought with that?
I don't know. It's always so risky when you take a guy from college to the NBA. But I mean, I think everybody come out of Villanova has been like, who's gotten drafted. Like, you look at Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, even Jalen Brunson. Like, they've all been decent role players. They're all prepared somewhat for the NBA because he runs somewhat of an NBA offense. I think I would go with Fred Hoiberg before I would go with Jay Wright for sure. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not a Villanova fan. I watch them. I don't know enough about them, but like and everything that he's handling the Javon Quinterly situation right now, it just kind of like rubs me the wrong way with him.
Yeah, because I mean, with me personally, I throw it out there just because I know you're from the area, but for me, he is the guy. Like, because you're not going to get a Carl, you're not going to get a Calipari, you're not going to get a Coach K. Right now, if you're going to college, the guy you're targeting is either Jay Wright or Tony Bennett at Virginia. And for those two guys, you're going to have to really pull them away. Because, like, for Jay Wright, he's been there since 01.
I think the biggest thing with this is you have some time to work with, obviously, with Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins just signing recent extensions. Wiggins' extension kicked up this year, and then Towns will kick in next year. So you'll have times with those core pieces. So maybe a college coach could work just to let him have a year to get adapted to the NBA game. But if I'm the Minnesota Timberwolves and I'm looking at what to do, I want someone with experience because I want someone that these guys are not going to be pushing around, that they're going to respect immediately. The reason why they respected Ryan Saunders is because he's been there for 5 years. He's been there since Wiggins. He's been there since Cat came into the organization.
So you think they would not respect somebody from college?
I think it's a possibility. You need some credibility, and I think Ryan Saunders had that ability to, because they worked with Flip, and then they obviously saw how much Flip meant to them. They respected Flip when Flip was their head coach, and then obviously Ryan coming with them. They've worked with Ryan for the past 5 years, or at least he's worked with the organization for the past 5 years. I think that had a lot to do with it. I think that if you're going to go out there, you need to get someone who has the ability to respect them, but also have the ability for them to respect him. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think a guy that would be interesting to work with, and this is going back off Jake's team and the 76ers, I think you can look at a guy in Monty Williams, a guy who obviously had to leave his position because of his wife's unfortunate passing. And he it's unfortunate to hear that's why he left his head coaching position. He was also an associate head coach with the Thunder. Now he took 2 years off, now back with the Philadelphia 76ers. He had success in his career with the New Orleans Pelicans, made it to the playoffs twice in his 5 years there, 46 and 36 in his first year, 2010, 2011. 2014, 2015 was 45 and 37. Lost in the first round both times, but he's worked with multiple stars. In that first run, he had Chris Paul and David West, 2 All-Stars, also had Trevor Ariza. And in 2014, 2015, he worked with Anthony Davis, Tyreek Evans, Drew Holiday, Eric Gordon, even Ryan Anderson. So he's had success before, and having worked with Anthony Davis, a very versatile, great big, I think that would play into his help of the development of Karl-Anthony Towns, as well as working with Joel Embiid. And I think he's a guy that you can respect right away because he's obviously put his time in as a player. He's put his time in as a coach, something that I don't think Thibodeau did. I don't think Thibodeau was a player. So I think having that ability to relate to them as a player, relate to them, being a coach, having that experience working with young guys before, I think Monty Williams would be a very intriguing hire, at least for the head coaching spot. GM-wise, I'm not really sure who they should go with. Hoiberg would be interesting. I'd like to see him get a shot because I think he's a smart mind. He's worked in a front office before, kind of like Steve Kerr in that way. I think he'd be an interesting hire for GM, but I think coach-wise, Monty Williams would be a very interesting name to bring back into the head coaching realm if he's ready.
Here's the thing, though, and this is the last thing I'll throw in about Flip Saunders that is interesting. The thing that looks into it is like, they're happy with him right now, and I can't debate that they're not. Ryan Saunders. I keep saying
Flip is dead.
Ryan Saunders. They're familiar with him, because they've been coaching with him. But also you have to look at it this way. He's 32 and Cat and Wiggins are 23. They are far closer in age than any NBA head coach than obviously Thibodeau was. I mean, if Hoiberg came in, he'd be a 46-year-old guy compared to the 32 Saunders. And I just look at it, is that playing in as well? It would almost be if Dave and I were, I think maybe if I'm doing the math right, 3 or 4 years older, it would be a similar, if we were 2 years older, it would be a similar age gap between us and yourself, would be Cat to Ryan Saunders. So, I mean, that plays into it as well, where how is that going to work out long term? Right now, it's fine because we're in the post-Tom Thibodeau, and players are great to not have Thibodeau kind of ruling over their team. But what happens next year when they're really trying to make a push? How does that play in when they're in the thick of things and not just, oh, you're our interim coach that you've been around. Like, you've been around, we're comfortable, but that interim tag is still there. So this is a complex situation in my mind.
That's why I think you go with a guy who has experience not only in the playoffs but also at working with young guys before in Monty Williams, because he also he has a story you could respect. He has a background that you could respect. I think that's something that, when you go through traumatic things, people start looking at you in a different way. How did you respond? And I think that could be something that he's able to relate with to his players. And again, he's worked with young players. He's working with Ben Simmons right now. He's working with, and I think Ben and Cat are tight. He has guys that he's worked with before in the NBA. Anthony Davis, obviously, as well. So I think he does have that respect as well. Dave, final thoughts.
I am with you on the head coaching choice. Actually, it's kind of weird. I'd like to see Saunders stick it out, obviously, through the end of this year. And if he pulls a miracle, awesome. Like, credit to him. But I'm with you. I think that they need to get someone who's got that coaching experience, especially someone who's worked with superstars before. So, in that respects, nailed it, Sean. Nailed it. You mentioned Ryan Anderson and the group of superstars. I just want to know. One of these names is not like the other.
It was that or Amir Sheik, so.
You know who
the Turkish Delight?
You know who I don't want them to hire? That, like, every single article I've seen their name?
Yeah.
Chauncey Billups. I don't want to see Chauncey Billups as that.
He's a GM.
No, he'd be GM.
Or GM, okay. Because I was seeing head coach, like, candidates for the head coaching job.
No,
and it was Fred Hoiberg, Chauncey Billups. I'm like, I don't want him as my head coach.
I think a lot of the stuff I heard was GM.
Okay.
I don't know. And then Fred made comments even about him preferring, to be a head coach instead of a GM. He preferred to be a coach instead of the front office. So it's intriguing, but I just don't. I
feel with Fred, he wants that connection with the players.
He wants a chance to coach the guys he wants to coach.
Bingo.
And I don't know that he's going to get that in the NBA. I think he should probably go back to college. He will be able to recruit his guys for his system, and you have so much more control in college. I think if he ends up here, he could get a GM who does not have the same vision as him, running the same problem as he had on the Bulls, where things just don't line up for him.
Just a little bit better because it's not Garpax.
Well, yeah, no one's worse than Garpax.
Jake,
a lot better.
Why don't you give your final thoughts on the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Well, actually, I disagree. I think Fred Hoiberg is the guy that they should go after.
Right.
I think this team could actually fit his offense a lot better than the Timberwolves. The Bulls did. And I think they just need to find that number 2 guy, and maybe Wiggins. I'm saying he can't turn into that, which means he'll probably average 30 a game for the next 10 games. That's how this stuff goes.
Curse of the Jake.
But yeah, Chris Sons, they won 3 in a row last time when I said their coach should be fired.
4.
Yeah, 4. But yeah, I think Fred Hoiberg is the guy for this job. I think he could fit their offense really well, and hopefully they'd actually buy into his system, unlike the Chicago Bulls. And he's not working with Garpax, so he's not working with the worst GM in the league. So, I mean, can't get much worse than working with the Bulls.
It's true.
Is it bad that the digs don't even hurt anymore? Like, no. I just no reaction to the digs anymore.
You know Garpax is bad. I'm not even trying to take a dig.
We're numb.
All right, that's going to do it for the Minnesota Timberwolves talk. Let us know down in the comments below what you think about the Minnesota Timberwolves and their future, what they should do. We do want to thank Jake for jumping on, as always. If you do want to become like Jake, he's one of a kind, so sorry. But if you want to become a patron like Jake, check out patreon.com/MostValuable Look at that $10 tier, and you could be like Jake, coming on to the Fast Break Podcast and talk about the topics that you like.